goal is the application of technology to help people live to a great age and to do so with dignity and in good health. Researchers in gerontechnology around the world make significant contributions to this field every day. Much of the seminal work was conducted in the Netherlands at the Technical University of Eindhoven and in Finland through the Ministry of Health and Vapu Taipale. The ISG core principles and values support the well-being of adults through the use of technology to help them remain embedded in their socio-cultural environment. Our outreach efforts are many. The Society provides much needed information on the use of technology by older adults, including human factors work to design new information and communication technologies that are easy for adults to use. The information is shared freely with the citizens of the world through our free journal, which is online at the address shown on the screen. We also hold biannual conferences that are held around the world. The next one will be held in Trondheim, Norway, and you'll learn more about that in the next presentations. There are a number of misconceptions about older adults and their ability to use technologies. One of these is, of course, that simply older adults can't learn to use the new technologies. Well, we know that this is false. Older adults do use cell phones and computers, and they do have network access. Many of them already access online services to interact with their physicians and family members. They also have misconceptions floating about that older adults are homogenous in their technology skill level, and that's not true either. Older adults vary very significantly in their ability to use technology. Many of these individuals who have recently retired were quite adept at using technology in their working years, and they still browse the web, use email, and use Twitter and other social media. Another misconception is that the older adults have all got disabilities that prohibit technology use. And that's another falsity. While it's true some older adults have sensory and physical limits, these technologies allow more communications options. For example, text-to-speech converters and speech-to-text converters allow audio and visual channels to be swapped for people who might have hearing limitations or vision limitations. One must always remember that the technology options for communications vary widely. The most basic functionality of the telephone has been around for over a century and very well known to quite a few people. The information that is carried in the human voice, the intonations, the pauses, and the emotional qualities can provide invaluable information about the mental state of the person that you're conversing with. Electronic mail and short messaging service texts are also routinely used by many older adults, as well as the more popular Twitter and Facebook options for communicating with family and taking part in shared events. However, the downside is that text-based mediums can be misinterpreted because they are by their nature cold mediums that do not convey well the human emotion, intonation, and so forth that is carried within the human voice. More recently, video conferencing software has become ubiquitous, and it's relatively inexpensive and perhaps even free to individuals, and has been used to create family gatherings of dozens of people simultaneously, especially for tools such as Zoom. The inclusion of video as well as audio signals provides even more information than voice alone, and provides more information about how an older adult who may be struggling with isolation is doing. Not only do you hear in the audio signal the quality of the intonation, but you also have some means of providing reassurance that the individual is looking well. So the sight and sound together also provide extra information that you might not receive otherwise. One well thought out video conferencing technology that I just briefly want to describe is the AgeWell Network Centers of Excellence product that has been developed recently for older adults directly, called FamilyNet. This product has been made in conjunction with universities throughout Canada. The AgeWell Network Centers of Excellence has been a very well funded and supported governmental effort to bring about high technology for the use of older adults throughout the world. This, of course, is only one of these types of video conferencing technologies developed around the world, but we wanted to draw your attention to it here today. One of the things that many people don't consider is the fact that you can engage with older adults through the use of gaming. We typically think of gaming as being just something for younger people that they can get really into, but it turns out that older people game quite a lot too. We have found, for example, that they're very likely to play with family members in other states. So while they may be living alone, be empty nesters, they can still interact meaningfully and play these games over a day-long period. Some typical conversions of games like Scrabble and Monopoly that we grew up with before the internet have been modified and are made available now at little or no cost to anyone who wants to play these games online with their family members and children. These also have typically some kind of a chat feature which allows you to converse with the person that you're playing the game with. So even if you're not in the same room with them, you can be at another country for that matter. You can still engage and have meaningful interactions over fun activities like games. Since it may be possible for a person to spread the virus without even knowing that they have it, some congregate facilities have instituted a lockdown that prevents family members from even entering the facility to visit. Although older adults in these facilities may themselves not be familiar with technology, staff members in these facilities have been taking the unprecedented step of bringing iPads and other types of technologies into the assisted living facilities and nursing homes to allow their families to reconnect with people who are being protected within these facilities. This has been done recently in a New York Times article, was a description of it, and they've actually seen increases in the amount of time spent with the older adult who is being protected in the nursing home. In some cases, as much as 100% increase in family interactions that previously were not nearly as great. Finally, these very same tools that have been used to reconnect the older adults with family members and the like, and their caregivers, have been used more frequently in the pandemic for telemedicine activities. These include the ability to interact with one's physician and have face-to-face consultations via Skype and other tools that negate the requirement to have the older adult exposed to risk as they're transferred from the assisted living facility to a care facility. So to the extent that these activities can be done and can be done well via a camera on a pad or on a phone, this can, again, reduce the likelihood that the individual will be exposed to people carrying the coronavirus. So In conclusion, if there is a silver lining to this pandemic, it's that it's removed many of the barriers to the implementation of ICT for the benefit of older adults that are living alone or in congregate settings. Electronic access has transitioned from a want to a need. And with this transition, the motivation to use it becomes quite intense by all the parties concerned. No longer is the older adult using technology as a favor to a family member in order to improve communication, but they're doing it because now it's the only way to really communicate with the outside world, and if you don't use it, you're kind of up the creek. So at this point, we'll put the floor open for questions, and I thank you very much.
Well, that was a most interesting talk, Bill, and certainly I can identify with some of the things that you said. Since this virus came into place, I've been doing story time with Grandma, with my granddaughter who lives 3,000 miles away. And certainly in our province, we've seen an increase in use of telemedicine, and funding is now being provided to enhance that. Can you tell me, as the first question, and I hope other people will join in and type in their questions, what enhancements are needed to improve the tolerance of older people who are isolated to using the technologies, the new stuff that's out there?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great question, and thank you, Gloria. When we look at these technologies, they have been, in large part, enhancements on existing technology that was developed in the last century. For example, the first being the telephone, if you will, which was able to communicate voice, and from that, as I mentioned, you get intonation, you get information about pauses, how a person's voice is, how strong it is, whether it wavers. There's a lot of things that are encoded in that signal. Likewise, when video became possible in the latter part of the last century, we had the opportunity to see another individual, and we could see if they looked wan, or they had not been eating, or looked undernourished, or perhaps something about the state of the place that they were living in, as far as, is it cluttered, or has it been being kept clean? These types of background information can be gathered from that. But one of the things that human beings absolutely require, and which is missing, unfortunately, is the sense of touch, and that has never been more clear than this has been made now during this pandemic. With individuals who are forbidden from even having a handshake or even patting a person on the back, the contact comfort that typically can be transferred from one individual to another, to be given to another person, a hug that you would get from your children, you may not be able to get, because the penalty might be that it'll kill you. So the technology right now has no provision for passing on human contact. Early work has been done at this point on robotics and haptics, but I suspect that that will be an area of greater interest as people get further into this pandemic and the need is shown to be greater, because this will unfortunately not be the last pandemic that we have. There probably will be others.
A quick question to which you can give a quick answer. Do you think that many of these new measures will stick around once people can be physically in contact with one another?
The answer to that is, I think absolutely they'll stick around, and for the same kinds of reasons that we have developed these up to this point. We know, for example, that people routinely used Skype and other techniques to interact with family in other states. What has happened as the access to normal physical establishments has been reduced, we've switched to online shopping, and we've even bought groceries and the like online. Once these conveniences get set up, it's very likely that people will continue to use them because they've become familiar with them and they like them. It's sort of the genie is out of the bottle and it's hard to put it back in.
Okay. Another question is the challenge of how can we teach skills when we can't be with the older person to show them, and that doing so by phone seems very challenging. If I can add in there, there is a group in Canada called the Cyber Seniors that puts seniors together with young people who are technologically very savvy. And they have been doing a series of webinars. So Cyber Seniors, if you Google that, you can still get on to the programs that they're doing this week. And they're really quite good.
That's an excellent point. And one of the things that we see in the International Society for Gerontechnology across the globe is researchers and different networks being set up exactly like what you're talking about, Gloria, to provide assistance for older adults to master these technologies. Not everyone has access to a very technology savvy grandchild. And in this day and age, that access may be limited because of the COVID-19. But there are a number of really good how-to videos. If the person knows how to go to Google and type in a question regarding how do I use Skype, they could wind up getting access to all kinds of different videos on how to do that that are at various levels of complexity.
Okay, well, we're off to a very good start, but now we're going to go to the next speaker, who is Jan Grafsman from Finland. We need to have Jan's slide, please. And Jan is one of the founders, the fathers, the developers of this field of gerontechnology. So it's really a delight and an honor to have him with us this morning. You can read more about his bio on the screen right now. As you can see, he started out as a research engineer in medical technology and has been very much involved in the whole developments of technology for an aging society. So with no further ado, Jan is going to talk to us, and he's on the sexy topic of robotics.
Okay, well, I don't know if I'm sexy. First of all, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a professor. I would describe myself as a social engineering scientist, or I prefer even gerontechnologist. I will give no definition of who is old, because 20 years or 80 years or in the middle somewhere when you're 50, there's no definition of what you can do or what you want to do. I will focus, or I like to focus, on an aging society and what can engineers do to make that aging society happen. And I refer to very old scholars in this field, like Matilda Riley, social gerontologist, Powell Lawton, and my mentor, Jim Fozar. Next slide, please. A short abstract of what I try to address. First of all, the human environment interaction is existential for us. And we need this interaction to survive disasters of all sorts. In my view, this interaction has two components. What's coming into us, what do we perceive, what can we communicate, what can we tell and do to the people or the technical systems in our environment. And more importantly, and that is the topic of my presentation, how can we control, how can we operate, how can we do things in our environment? There's a lot of research at the moment to find robotic solutions to counterattack this pandemic and other big challenges in space or on Earth. I will only give a brief review of what is happening in robotics, and I hope to show some relevance for our aging population. Next slide, please. Being an engineer, I like schemes. So in these schemes, you see in the top the human system, our sensory, our perceptive systems, our cognition, how do we process the information, and then how do we organize and coordinate physical action. It's depending on how our internal system works. I'm very sorry for the cold approach here, but please try to understand me. Our internal system is brains, nerves, muscles, and our organ systems. Then, in the blue, our outside world. There's controls for any technical device that we are trying to use. And sometimes in the display, we see how fast we drive or how loud the noise is. In between the top, we humans, and the bottom, the technology, the environment, we have interfaces, and we have to interact through those interfaces. And that's where the big challenge is for engineers and designers to make this circle go round and round and round in time. And that's the axis in the bottom, time, with a question and exclamation mark. Time plays a very big role here in at least 3 dimensions. We have our human system, our biology. We are aging, we are changing over time, and we have to understand that. There's the whole science of gerontology that is doing the research there and can give us maybe some clues and answers. Then there's the blue side, the technology. It is changing faster, faster and faster. And sometimes we cannot cope, our biological system cannot cope with the pace of change in the technological environment. And then, but I hope that the next speaker will address that, there's also the time dimension of our actual behavior. We all have past experiences, whether we're old or young. We have experience in life. We also, depending not whether we're old or young, but we all have future expectations, and that determines how we act and behave in the reality of today, in our social contexts and the like. Next slide, please. Now I will just go into what we have in robots in our present time. First, domestic robots in and around our house. We do not realize that the earliest technology tools that we had were the hammer, knife, a tweezers, or a helping hand, the grabber to pick something from the floor. These are basically an extension of our manual dexterity, of our mobility, whatever. Things we cannot do with our bare hands. Can be helped with the use of tools. Then we go a little bit further. Now we have a vacuum cleaner and a lawnmower would do the job for us without our physical powers. There was Manus. Which was a development in the Netherlands almost 50 years ago, a tabletop robot arm that could help feeding when you could not ladle your soup out of your own plate. More recently, we have social robots. And you can find them all over the internet. They're still expensive, but they work. In the present time, we have the pickup and delivery robots. We have disinfecting and sanitizing robots. And these robots disinfect and clean better than a professional cleaner. Then we have the diagnostic robots that can come into your home and help you with diagnostics of all sorts, of all your or many of your vital parameters. The big dilemma is here. What does that do to our privacy? How autonomous are these robots are going to operate? Do we want to share our private environments with a robot or a machine? Next slide, please. We have robots in the public domain. Again, the pickup and delivery systems, the diagnostic, testing, tracking systems, public announcements instead of the old big sound systems that made all kinds of public announcements. We can much more make them much more direct. We can use them for quarantine enforcement if we want. The disinfection and sanitation systems can be operated by robots rather than human beings. And monitoring and control of traffic flows. How efficient can you bring the goods in the place where they have to be in the right moment and the right time? And then we can think about robots that help us socialize. Next slide, please. We come to the robots in institutional environments. Think of hospitals, nursing residents, schools, prisons, workplaces, and so on. The disinfection robots using ultraviolet lights and cleaning surfaces. Robots are better than cleaning professionals, and you can use very strong ultraviolet sources to clean and disinfect environments, but only when there's no people around them. Then we have the reception robots in Japan, Taiwan, Singapore. We now have robots in hotels that are temporarily places for people in quarantine, but robots do the hostess function, and they even socialize, or at least make people, visitors, feel at ease. The sanitizing stations, then dispensing of medication and food, and then there's the telepresence. Robots can operate in very complex environments. The picture shows a telemedication, surgical theater, where from a distance, robots are doing the surgery. In general, robots can support a safe and seamless supply chain. Next slide, please. My view of robots in the future. I think we should seek, and there are some already, solutions in the hybrid systems. That means a robot who is combined with a professional, a human being, an expert that can do multi-operations and just use the robot to do it in a remote place. Another development is the soft robots. And there I come to what the first speaker said about haptics and feelings and handshakes are developed both in Palo Alto, in Stanford University, and the University of San Diego, California. At least that's what I found. And these soft robots can have a multi-shape, and they can have multi-functions. The next field is the wearable robot and robot implants. We already do have them. What about a ring around your finger with sensors? What about a bracelet with sensors for all or many vital functions? And what about robot implants like an insulin pump or a pain pump? They do exist, but many more functions can be thought of for this type of robots. Then a challenge for everyone. Do-it-yourself robots. If you just go around the internet and look at the do-it-yourself pages, there is a lot of simple tools we can build ourselves. And I do not know yet the spread of three-dimensional printing machines, but